Welcome back, our dear viewer, to this show. It's the Bible Journey. Glad once again that you have joined us for our discussion as we continue with the book of Exodus, and the chapter is 21. With me again are our pastors, Pastor John Kabira, Pastor Dan Abuya, and Pastor Peter Nyaga. Now, after the laws concerning servants are the laws concerning violence. And verse 12 starts right off by saying, "He who strikes a man so that he dies shall surely be put to death. However, if he did not lie in wait, but God delivered him into his hand, then I will appoint for you a place where he may flee." Now, who should I start with? Let me start with Pastor Nyaga.
I think you should finish until
you want 14. Up to 14? Okay,
yes.
fine. Verse 14 says, "But if a man act with premeditation against his neighbor to kill him by treachery, you shall take him from my altar, that he may die."
Right.
I think basically verse 12 to verse number 27, it basically talks about the sacredness of life, the sanctity of life, and the need to safeguard. So it deals with laws that regard to violence and disability, because life is sacred. And so basically that's what now we see from these few verses here. And they tried as much as they could to touch on almost every aspect of this life. So maybe verse by verse you see different situations that may endangering somebody's life, and how that particular situation was being protected by the laws.
And when you look at Pastor Dan, when you look at verse 13, however, if he did not lie in wait, but God delivered him into his hand, then I'll appoint for you a place where he may flee. So it is, I think, the introduction of cities of refuge.
That is right, exactly.
Because it's accidental.
Sure, yeah. It wasn't premeditated. But even before I say that, I want to say, you're going to see the order. It's like it declines in intensity. Right, yeah. From murder, just like our code.
Manslaughter
today.
and coming down
manslaughter, stuff like that, And that tells you the basis of the judicial systems of the world today. They are drawn from here. I know we've seen arguments that the Babylonians, there's the code of Hammurabi. Yeah, for example, guys say that even Moses stole this from there. He plagiarized. But there's nothing like that. God is the originator of all truth and all justice. So we can safely infer that the Hammurabi code is the one which was plagiarized from here, because God is the true giver of the laws here. So having said that, I want to quickly agree with you that
actually even on that, for instance, the issue of manslaughter, killing, we find it in the book of Genesis, even before this, in chapter 9 verse 6, if you can appreciate reading. It's very clear, way before we come to the book of Exodus, in the very beginnings, because it says, if I can read then verse number 6, Genesis 9 verse number 6, "Whoever sheds the blood of a man, by man shall his blood be shed." That's a law.
Right.
In regards to killing. For God made man in his own image. So we safeguard the life of people because this life came from God.
And all these things, they continue confirming to you that it is not like God is actually giving the laws now. It is just that these guys, they have been in a deep slumber until it almost got out of their systems. If anything, as you move forward, all God's laws, they are written in our conscience and in our hearts, and we all knew that. Now, anyway, they're being codified now and being recorded down here. So you're right that if the death is not intentional, God also makes provision for that, because what matters to God much more is the intent of the heart. So the cities of refuge, these are spoken of in the book of Numbers, chapter 35, Deuteronomy 19. God made provision, the order was very clear that even the highways leading to the cities of refuge, they were to be clear, no potholes, so that the man who has to save his life does not find any encumberment, any hindrance at all, And so, but lest some guys, take advantage of this and abuse this provision, God says that, if a man does that, kills a person by treachery, then purports to run to the seat of refuge, you don't respect that. That is invalid. It's null and void.
You take him from
Get
there
him out of the
and
altar, kill him still.
Kill him.
So,
yeah, and of course, again, one thing here, of course, going forward, is if he strikes his father or his mother, he shall surely be put to death.
yeah,
but again,
there's no discussion about it. There's no provision.
Yeah.
There are no
But look how off it is.
Yeah.
Like, let's say in Kenya, we have got we've got murder,
Right, yeah.
and then we've got
The
manslaughter. Then we have got with violence, something with violence. Well, let's call it robbery with violence. We've got you know, and what is it about beating, battery, and what have you. Then God just puts this one in. He who curses his father or his mother shall surely be put. Remember, the subtitle is the laws concerning violence.
Of course, he begins by strikes, and
Yes.
then he says even cursing.
Yeah, I'm saying, look at it's
Verse
about the law
15
concerning
and
yes.
17.
But the whole point is cursing his father and mother is so huge, it's put in the category of violence.
It's killing.
Yeah.
It's literally killing. And I will appreciate that. I will imagine if my daughter, we always joke around this point, we say, people say, you will go and tell your parent who told you to give birth to me. Have you ever thought what that will do to a parent?
Right.
It will, for me, it will literally kill me if my own daughter told me something like. So I was just trying to say, look at him saying, honor your father and your mother. Then in the category of dying, you know, with the worst of taking life away, he considers cursing your own father and mother is worthy of taking life, because you've literally killed those parents.
You know, God is so gracious, because these are the things we used to say when we were children. Your parent would beat you and you tell him, why did you give birth to me? I didn't apply. Yeah, and you know, actually, when now Paul talks about it and says the days of our ignorance, God winked at them. And it's
You
like
count yourself in there.
Yeah, at least that grace, because by now that we know, when you are grown up as a, you know, you are grown up and you say that you deserve to die.
And I wasn't to also mention something about, looks like God is not a very fair God here to allow laws to be instituted that actually support killing. You know, God says, if you do this, let you be killed. And then he's letting people to do that. You know, he has given some people powers to do that. They are judges or whatever, judicial systems. And you know, in this country, we've been discussing about whether it's sacred or not to take capital punishment, to take away life. To take away life because of offenses. Now, God has three centers of power. The authority is delegated in three ways. One is the family. He has delegated his authority in the family, where the father is representative of God. Then he has delegated authority to the church. Says whatever the church binds on earth is bound in heaven. Then the nations, the governments, the civil government. The civil government leaders act on behalf of God. So if you steal and you go and you're put in prison because you stole, it is God judging you.
Yeah. That's what we fail to
and you see,
understand.
like this text, the book of Romans, chapter 13, which to me is very important. Chapter 13 of Romans, verse 3 and 4.
Romans 13, verse 3 and 4. It says, for rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. Verse 4, for he is God's minister to you for good.
I like that point. When you see policemen and all these people who guard our laws and, you know, sanity in this country, the Bible says they are servants of God. And just continue reading there.
So when they charge you 500 for not fastening your safety belt.
Yes.
Okay. Then verse 4, for he does not bear the sword in vain, for he is God's minister, an avenger to execute wrath on him who practices evil.
You know, this is very radical actually. It's very, very radical. You see when the Bible says, for he does not bear the sword in vain. It means if he strikes with that sword, it's God who has allowed it. God has delegated authority through that person who he calls him his servant with that sword to strike you.
And he has all the rights to do
it. Yeah, is heavenly authority.
Yeah, he is actually acting on behalf of God.
Yeah, so all the policemen or the judges who will determine your case whether to be locked or to be killed, if they're doing that based on the justice of every given law or government, they're doing it on behalf of God.
Yeah, now there is the problem, because sometimes if we don't do it according to the real justice,
that's a different matter.
I was very clear. It was very clear. If they're doing it based on the justice of the law.
On that same category also is kidnapping.
Yeah, kidnapping
which takes you to the intent, the spirit of killing. It's considered as killing when you kidnap, because it is penalty, is also death.
Yeah, because it's taking somebody's life.
That is right, So, so you know, that is how God sees it, and you may be like, well, that's kidnapping really, but what is the intent? You know, now it expands on thou shalt not murder. Yeah, if you're taking somebody's, because kidnapping basically you are denying somebody their autonomy,
their freedom.
That is right, their autonomy over their life.
To be a person.
That is right, to be a person. So very,
and
very
then you
important.
take them and sell them, yet they don't belong to you. Verse 22 and 22. What Pastor Kabira was talking about: if men fight and hurt a woman with child, so that she gives birth prematurely, yet no harm follows, he shall surely be punished accordingly as the woman's husband imposes on him, and he shall pay as the judges determine.
Before he comments on that, just a principle I want to draw from what we've left in between there. That is, you know, you cause injury, you hit somebody by accident, you know, but they don't die. That is okay. You may not be killed, but then you take responsibility. So you see today, if you have an accident and I'm injured, you're going to pay for, you know, insurance will pay for my medical expenses and all the money, all my income. The income that I will have earned during my entire lifetime.
The wastage of time. There.
Exactly. That is the principle. That is,
and actually, people need to know that it is godly when you're demanding for your rights which have been violated. It's godly. Yeah.
It's godly. It's not like you're being this kind of...
You know, so at times Christians, things like being a Christian is losing your rights. Really, it isn't. So.
Always being under humiliation.
Yes. God recognizes that people can take advantage of you, and that's why he gives these laws to safeguard you.
Wow. And look at this, verse 26 and 27. Oh, Pastor, you're supposed to first of all...
No. Ideally, yes, 26, 27. Because anyway, it's still the same concept of life. Even if you hit a woman and she gives birth prematurely, you better pray that nothing bad happens. But if otherwise, if something bad happens, you're going to pay for it, because
according to what
even
the husband shall
that baby is life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I needed to say. That baby is considered life.
The fetus.
The fetus
still life.
Is still life. So you better pray the baby is born. If the baby is not born, what is it called?
It's a premature?
No, well, actually it's called abortion.
Exactly. Right. Well,
okay.
Yes. Maybe it may be miscarriage. It may be abortion, whatever. I want to call it like that. If you cause a child to be born prematurely, then you have got a case to answer to God. You better pray things turn out well. If things turn out bad, worse, then you've taken life also again of a child. No matter what you may consider, it was maybe I was hitting the mother. I was not hitting the child. But yes, you've caused, with hitting of the mother, you've also caused another life to be interrupted. I hope you understand. I don't want to get into specifics of this.
The politics of pro-life and...
Yes, pro-life and all that. But really, I want you to see how God still counts, even, you know, you liable for a life that you may not have seen, but despite it was there. Now, I may not know whether it was there or not, but look at, just to say 26, 27, is if I am your slave and you hit me and I lose my teeth or my eye, then I'm free. Because after all, it's not about 6 or 7 years. It's that also is part of my life. You know how that will mean a lot for me.
If I would bring a text, the book of Numbers.
Right.
I take the book of Numbers. These accidental incidences, we are playing, and then he hits me, I die. Okay? Now, the book of Numbers gives a provision in chapter 35. He is not supposed to die, even if it was accidental. There's a ransom that he needed to pay. There's a price needed to pay when it has been investigated and it's very clear it was accidental.
It's not premeditated.
It's not premeditated. But when it is premeditated, then the book of Numbers says you cannot pay anything as a ransom for that person has to die. Maybe you can bring that verse.
It's
the series of refuge.
That one, chapter 35, verse that one.
Verse 31, it says, moreover, you shall take no ransom for the life of a murderer who is guilty of death, but he shall surely be put to death.
Exactly.
That's right. And one, I wanted to say something about this eye for eye, tooth for tooth.
Even as you talk, tell the lawyer, Zugu defending
the murderers.
Well, murderers is until it's proven.
Well, so maybe it was not premeditated.
So maybe they are trying to make sure that actually he killed. So after that, after we've made sure he did it, then
well, here it talks about judges, so I would believe judges.
Of course.
We'll have to do their work. The eye for eye, you know,
yes.
who popularly said, was it Gandhi who said eye for eye, and
will cause everybody blind.
Blind and toothless. Right here. But really, the principle here is that God wasn't encouraging a tit for tat. He's actually promoting the royal law. What is that? The golden law, yeah? You know, what, Matthew 7:12, what you desire be done to you, you do it also unto others. Yeah, really, that is the whole point here. And taking responsibility. Will you like me to gouge out your eye? You wouldn't. So don't gouge out my eye. And if everybody did that, practice that, then no eye is going to
be a peaceful society, no violence at all. Now, animals. Sometimes, of course, we've heard about it even in the news. If an ox goes a man or a woman to death, then the ox shall surely be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox shall be acquitted.
Well, I will say, you just read 28, 29, 30, 31. It's almost the same thing.
Almost the same thing, yeah.
We can what it talks about is killing by proxy. Can I call it killing by proxy? Kinda. It says, if an animal without the knowledge of an owner causes death, then the animal has taken out life, so its life has to go. But if the owner knew this animal has got this behavior and has not done something to do about it, now call it a car, for example. If your car is faulty and you know about it, it's called murder, by the way, if you didn't know. Whether, you know, that is, you have got responsibility even over things that can cause death.
Or not a dog that is
or a dog that has rabies.
Yes.
And you know it intentionally. That is what God is trying to, you know, some people are very clever to say it's not me. But if you are aware, what were we discussing? You're talking about sins of omission and commission.
That's right.
You know, you may pretend it is not me. I didn't know about it. Now, I don't know what the bullfighters in Kakamega will say about that. I don't want to get to that story. But the whole point God is trying to say is still the same. If whether life is taken, whether by default or else, life will be taken away because life is important. You cannot, anyway, let me just stop it at that.
Okay. Let me also bring in this element of, from verse 33. And if a man opens a pit, or if a man digs a pit and does not cover it, and an ox or a donkey falls in it, the owner of the pit shall make it good. He shall give money to their owner, but the dead animal shall be his. If one man's ox hurts another, okay, first of all,
it's the same. You can actually finish.
Should I? Okay, fine. That's 35. If one man's ox hurts another, so that it dies, then they shall sell the live ox and divide the money from it, and the dead ox shall also divide. Or if it is known that the ox tended to thrust in time past, and its owner has not kept it confined, he shall surely pay ox for ox, and the dead animal shall be his own.
The principle of insurance, they call it indemnity.
Restoring you back to your initial financial position.
Exactly. So that is really the point that we are seeing here. That's why you even see the last verse you read there. He shall give a live ox, but you know he keeps insurance, they keep the wreckage.
Yeah, so, it belongs to them actually.
That's right, yeah. So you're not going to benefit in any way, but you are
restored back to
where you were.
Wow.
So really,
so even the insurances drew their from here.
Well, you know, so long as we try to be fair, the insurance industry sometimes tends also to be very uncouth and naughty. But really, if we were all trying to be fair, you see, you'll go back to God's principle of fairness, of justice, and responsibility. Yeah, there's an aspect of taking responsibility. You can't go around saying that, but Mia was not there, and you know that your ox, you were told, it almost killed.
Has issues.
Yeah, it had a kid. You didn't dehorn it. You have to take responsibility.
Right. I don't know. Before Pastor you come in, I'm just trying to look at this and ask myself together with the viewer, if do you really realize that we could actually live without any other law apart from the laws of God?
Oh, yeah,
because
that's
they are all here. Even we are discovering insurance is all here. The principle of indemnity is in the Bible.
What does God's word speak about?
Yeah, so actually it's us who are tough-headed. That's why we have very many laws in these countries. And Pastor Nyaga, finally.
No, I was throwing a joke here saying, you know, these things we're talking about in these verses, they can be termed as foreign luxuries. Things that you bring in your life for your own comfort, but they're hurting other people, they're causing pain in other people's lives. So if my cell phone causes you death, or it harms you, maybe it blows and something happens to you, then I should be liable.
Yeah.
Should be liable.
Because you knew.
Well, whether I knew or not, you know that it's because I kept this thing. Because if I knew, I would have taken precautions to avoid that. There's no way I can say I knew and I didn't do anything about it. So the fact that I have it and it has caused you harm, then I am liable.
Wow. Thank you very much, my dear pastors, and I hope that even you as our dear viewer, you've really learned much from this, and you know, it really teaches us a lot. There are many things that we have not actually touched on, but you need to just sit down and read and understand what God is communicating to us concerning all these laws. And remember, they are not here to enslave us, but to make us even more free.
Amen.
God bless you. Until next time.
Amen.
Hello viewer and welcome. This is your usual program, The Bible Journey, and we are glad that you keep on tuning to this program so that you can learn much from this inspired word of God. And we hope that you have been learning too much and just as well as us. And welcome as we continue with our study. Today we'll be studying the book of Exodus, and the chapter is 21. Now, right from when we began Exodus chapter 20, it's all issues of laws and laws and laws, and that is what we are going on with. Now, welcome and come with us as we study Exodus chapter 21. With me on set are our guests, as usual. We have Pastor Peter Nyaga. Pastor, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ratamo.
And we also have our good pastor here, Pastor Dana Buya. Welcome.
Thank you, but only God is good.
Okay. And we also have with us our pastor, Kabira Wakabira.
Appreciate. Thank you.
Your name was almost disappeared. Now let's have a word of prayer from our pastor Dan Abuya as we begin.
Our good Heavenly Father, we thank you for this moment you have specially created for us to be at your feet. As we open your word, we desire that you teach us because you are the true teacher from heaven. Bless us together with those who are listening, our audience and the viewers. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen. Amen. And remember that, our dear viewer, you can always connect with us on our social media platforms that are indicated at the bottom of your screen. And you can also continue watching this program later at your own time on our YouTube channels, also indicated at the bottom of your screen. Now, my dear pastors, welcome as we begin this discussion. Now, the law here, the Lord decides again, you know, after he has put straight his covenant, his law, the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments, and then he has also talked about the law of the altars, concerning the altars. Now he goes again to the law concerning servants, and I think it was very important that he makes it clear concerning the servant and master relationship, which is very crucial even in our day-to-day life. Now, verse 1 of chapter 21 says, "Now these are the judgments which you shall set before them. If you buy a Hebrew servant, he shall serve you 6 years, and in the 7th he shall go out free and pay nothing." Now, just help me understand from that point.
Right. I want to make a clarification as we continue. Moses is in the mount, and all these laws are given at the same time. It's only that one set is written by God himself. The other one, it seems, Moses records all the others except the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments, yeah. So these other laws, you know, that is they fall under the ceremonial laws or civil laws that were judicial, you know, that dealt with contracts and so on and so forth, yeah. So Moses wrote them. So in a way that highlights it creates a distinction. The law that God himself wrote with his own hand and the laws that now Moses wrote here. So we began from the law of the altar already, that is ceremonial. And now here we are.
And before you continue, of course, verse 1 of chapter 20 had said, "And God spoke all these words, saying."
Right here.
So right from verse 1 to verse 17,
right,
it's God speaking. And we said there is no human effort here. There is no human hand in this. Right. Moses didn't do a thing. Then now there is that a little bit of... in verse 22, he says, "The Lord says to Moses, thus shall you say to the children of Israel." Again, now it's Moses to go and tell them. And now verse 1 of chapter 21 says, "Now these are the judgments which you shall set before them." Again, now there is a hand of Moses in this. Right. So I think it's good what you've already said.
Sure, right. Yeah.
You can,
and of course, the clarification about writing comes later. It's especially more clear when now, you know, after the instance at the golden calf, when now Moses is commanded to go and bring tablets, and God writes with his own finger. The Bible says, yeah. Now, there are instances where poverty will be too severe for an Israelite, to the point that it was even more, you know, better for you to give yourself, to offer yourself as a slave. Otherwise you die. So you could go and tell your neighbor who is well off that, okay, you know what, I work for you, you give me food. So that was, those scenarios were possible. Even today, actually people, they slave out for money.
Yeah.
Now what God is doing here is trying to maintain, in the long run, the dignity, the humanity of the person by putting a check-off point, a check-off system, a regulatory system, lest people take advantage and abuse their fellow human beings. Hopefully, in the 6 years, you know, your fortune might have changed.
Yes.
So that in the 7th year, there's the year of Jubilee, right? Yeah. So you could be released now. Every 7th year, it was like a Sabbath rest. Then now you could be free and you have a new beginning, a new lease of life to begin.
And I see Pastor Nyaga wanting to come in.
Yeah, I wanted to lay a little background on the issue of slaves and why it is important. Why does it come shortly after the Mount Sinai experience, the Ten Commandments? Now, verse 1 of chapter 20 says, I am your God who took you out of land of Egypt. Now that is referring to slavery. They were slaves. So God finds them very important to start addressing their situation and letting them know that they also have rights. The way they were able to exist in Egypt as slaves, those who will come into their homes as slaves, they also have rights. So it was talking of a contemporary real life situation that they would identify with before he advances into those other issues. He began with them. And as Pastor Dan was trying to bring out, there were 4 reasons that made one a slave in Egypt, not in Egypt, in Israel. There were 4. One is when there is, as he spoke about, poverty. Is there poverty? You have nothing to to eat at home. And that's we find in the book of Leviticus. If I could read quickly, 25 verse number 39. When there's extreme poverty, I don't know who is there. Can you quickly read for us Leviticus 25, verse number that. Or maybe we can appreciate. Our viewers can write and refer to it later.
I read.
You can write. Okay.
And if one of your brethren who dwells by you becomes poor and sells himself to you, you shall not compel him to serve as a slave.
Then number 2 was where a father sells his daughter with the intention one day she'll get married to that particular person. I think that's a common practice even with our people here, the masses. Then that's what we find in the book of Exodus 21, verse number 7. This was another way of one. When a man sells his daughter as a slave, she shall not go out as the male slaves do. Then the third reason why one would become a slave is when you become bankruptcy. You have nothing to turn to. You have debts here and there. And so you give yourself to your debtors, and so that you I mean creditors, not debtors, your creditors, so that you serve them. And that we find in 2 Kings 4 verse 1. It's very clear. Now the wife,
Kings 4 verse 1.
2 Kings 4 verse 1. Now the wife of one of those sons of the prophet cried to Elisha, your servant, my husband is dead, and you know that your servant feared the Lord, but the creditor has come to take my 2 children to be his slaves. In this particular incident, because of the situation, the creditor comes to take the children to become slaves. Then the last situation is when you are a thief. Thieves also, you could become a thief until you end up becoming a slave. So if you stole from me, then it's known. I've known you've stolen from me. And perhaps you have already spent what you stole from me. You cannot repay back. Then you come and become a slave. So those were the 4 ways one became slave. And so God thought it good to start addressing that particular issue because it was the immediate experience from Egypt.
Can I add?
Yes.
For me, the whole of chapter 21, God is talking about the sanctity of life. That no one, nothing has got power of life of another human being apart from I am the Lord your God. That he was referring to. So whether you're a slave, that's another human being. You cannot have hold of another human's life forever, including violence. The second part of it will be about violence, including even animals.
That's right.
Nothing. So he was trying to tell the Israelites that I redeemed you, and so your life is valuable to me. Not another man, not violence, not circumstances, not even animals should have power over somebody else's life, which should apply up to today. You know, the right to life is the most basic of all, that every person should have a right to life. It is carried over from God, this practice of God. So anyway, ideally, whether it's a servant, whether he may owe you or not, you cannot have somebody who will always be under you forever. Because otherwise, you will be in control of that person's life. You cannot even strike somebody. You cannot hit me because this me belongs to God.
Does not belong to
Does not belongs to you. No matter how much you think that I have messed up, ideally, that is not for me. The only time you will take a life, it's if in connection with God. That is what God was referring to. But for any other reason, by the time we get to where it says, even if an ox goes a man or a woman, that ox should be killed, because what? It's touching on human life, and that is not allowed.
So human life is very...
It's sacred.
Very
it belongs to God. That is what God said. I am the Lord your God, God of all things on earth.
So in the end, you leave them to go free, and they are now, you don't own them at all, but within the 6 or the 7 years.
On the 7th year.
On the 7th year. So for the 7 years, they are under you.
That's right.
They are your subjects. After that, you leave them to go. But then again, he says in verse 4 to 6, if I can read, then you can tell me more about it. If his master has given him a wife, and she has borne him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be her master's, and he shall go out by himself. But if the servant plainly says, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out free, then his master shall bring him to the judges, and shall also bring him to the door or to the doorpost, and his master shall pierce his ear with an awl, and he shall serve him forever.
That's right, yeah.
You marry when you are a slave. After you are 7 years elapses, you go free, but not with your wife and children, because they belong to the master.
Yeah, because you attained them there. And of course, before verse 3 says, if you came in with your wife, then you go out with your wife. That is a very fair thing, yeah. And further now...
What about the children? If you go out, you leave the children.
That is if you did not come with them.
If you didn't come with them. Assuming you came with your wife, or you came without a wife. You have a wife now, you have children. Do they become servants forever?
Well,
when you go free?
Well, okay, I don't want to conjecture here, but I think the principle that I draw from here is, that fairness. God is trying to tell us that, you can't be a God to another man.
Yes.
At some point, we have to cap on this. Yeah, we have to limit that and regulate that. Yeah, until or unless the last thing that you have where you stopped at, if willingly. You come and say, I mean, this is something that to be considered on its own, really. We don't have time for this. You came in single, and then you marry there, and you love your wife so much that you're ready to give your life as a slave forever. So then you'd go and tell, your master that, okay, you know what, I love you very much. Huh? Oh, you love your wife, of course, yeah. But like, I want to serve you forever. We know the reason is because of your wife. Then a mark is going to be there forever. And I don't want to go to the equivalences of Christ, and his permanent mark forever. But really, that is what's happening here. Because you can imagine a scenario like that, and the kids always seeing that mark, that scar forever. And it's because you gave your life so that you're there with them forever. But the point here is that then now voluntarily you take responsibility. But otherwise you should not be forced to be somebody's property.
If you pierce the ear, you are voluntarily saying you want to be a slave.
Right.
That's a fun fact. No, just saying.
No, the New Testament, like Pauline letters, it talks about bond servant, a bond servant. Now, bond servant is what this text is actually alluding to. I am a slave to Pastor Dan, but after serving my term, and discover Dan has been so good to me, so I voluntarily choose to remain with him based on acts of love that I have seen in him. I became a slave. First, I was forced by situation. The four situations that we have already mentioned, either of them made me a slave. But after serving this my master, I discovered my master is so good. Then I choose out of my own will to become and to remain forever. It's a servant, a slave. So at that particular time, there's a ceremony.
That's right.
That ceremony is done where your ear is pierced. And that's how we become slaves of Jesus Christ. We are born servant of Jesus Christ. We were slaves of sin, but Christ has loved us. He died for us on the cross, pushing us to become his slaves. But he says now, if you believe in me, is voluntary. No, you have seen his goodness.
That's right. Yeah.
No, you choose to remain with Christ. You become a bond servant. That's what Paul says. I have become a slave. a slave of Jesus Christ.
Right.
And the same Bible now speaks about Christ as a bond servant of God. And I think there are two explicit texts in the Bible. One is in the Old Testament, Psalms 40. Actually, when it talks about Jesus Christ having gone through the piercing of the ear, when he accepted to be the slave of his father. Chapter 40 of Psalms, verse number 6. It would be good for us to appreciate.
40 verse number 6. Let me read that. Sacrifice and offering you did not desire, my ears you have opened, burnt offering and sin offering you did not require.
My ears you have opened. That one opening you have pierced, you have marked.
Okay.
Yeah, that's Jesus Christ. And again, of course, that famous text of Philippians 2, verse number 7. Again, which is very, very significant, talking about Jesus Christ who emptied himself of everything, taking a form of a bond servant. Okay?
The slave.
He did that willfully. He was not forced. He discovered the goodness of the Lord. And so he engaged himself in actions of the act of being a slave out of the beauty that he had seen. I'm going to achieve a lot when I become a slave for my master.
Wow.
And his love for the wife, that is the church.
Let me read that verse. I think it's crucial. But he made himself of no reputation, taking the form of a bond servant.
Exactly,
and coming,
that's the one now.
Bond servant.
Bond servant is different from a slave. He's a slave who has voluntarily descended to become a slave because of the love he has seen in his master.
So that he became in the likeness of men. Wow. Now,
and so by the way, I want to throw in just a soft jab, you know, no offense intended, but you know, piercing your ears, there is no style in that. So you see that, because it's a trend nowadays.
I'm not mentioning that. I'm not going to say that. You are basically a slave. Whatever. That's what you say.
Actually,
I'm wondering, a slave
that piercing is you are actually saying I have accepted to be forever a slave to this particular thing.
I hope it's not.
Which is true.
It would better be a slave to God, because if it's the opposite, then
whatever thing, if it's beauty, if it's beauty, you're saying you're a slave forever.
Exactly. We'll come to that.
Hey,
we'll come to about fire sins. Yes.
Let me proceed. Verse 8 to 11. Should I really read it? Okay, let me read a few verses. If she does not please her master, who has betrothed her to himself, then he shall let her be redeemed. He shall have no right to sell her to a foreign people, since he has dealt deceitfully with her. And if he has betrothed her to his son, he shall deal with her according to the custom of daughters. If he takes another wife, he shall not diminish her food, her clothing, and her marriage rights. And if he does not do these three for her, then she shall go out free without paying money. It's about lady servants, yeah?
Yeah, it was, that's right, yeah. It was slightly different because, you know, this was a very common practice. Most would be given and they would be like concubines. And I know lots of other questions come in, you know, about sex slavery and so on. But these arrangements were very clear within that context at that time. Of course, God is still sanctifying these people and still teaching them holiness, but they are not there yet. So that is the level they are dealing with at this moment here. So the lady slaves, in all the instances generally, you don't take a lady to be a slave for you in the farm. You take a man to be a slave for you in the farm, because they have the muscle. In the house. And oftentimes then, they will become, you know, concubines, basically wives, So now, what if you get tired with her? So God once again is trying to protect her. Them, so lest you abuse that. That
rights as human beings.
That's right. In Genesis 16, for example, you find Hagar. Hagar is a slave. She's a servant who actually is Abraham's wife. So there are obligations and what she serves. So a slave, really, it's like a wife. So now, how do you deal with this kind of slaves? Once again, God is trying to make sure that, okay, that is where you are. I'm dealing with you at your level right now. Then be fair to this extent here.
I'll say, well, since we have a lady behind the camera here, and to all the ladies who are there, there is always an assumption that the Bible is hard on women, and gives men this freedom. This is one of those verses that protects the lady, the girl, including verse 22.
The girl child.
The girl child. I don't want to say girl child to be politically correct. But basically, God is giving a function that, so that, you know, in a highly patriarchal society, it is very easy to trash a lady. But God here has put something small. It may look small, but it's so big for the ladies out there that when you come, whether you are sold in as a slave, you deserve respect as a wife.
That's right.
That's why it even says, even if he takes another wife, he shall not diminish her food, her clothing, and her marriage rights.
So
whether she came, essentially, she may have come as a slave, but when she gets here and she becomes a wife, then she is a wife. So you need to treat her like that. Even if she has, verse 11 says, for one reason or the other, if you detest her and you think she's not worth it, you need to be able to let her go free without paying money, not even essentially about now years or something. So I think I would rather speak as a father of a daughter, that even the Bible considers that scenario, that somebody may take advantage of a lady. And so it put protection laws about the same. As I said, including verse 22, including if somebody hurts a woman and gives birth prematurely, including verse 31, whether you're son by a god or son or a god by a daughter, you know, stuff like that.
When
what I'm saying,
we should be talking about that.
Yes, I'm saying in generally, it's about God does not discriminate
against any
gender against the girl. He actually has a law to protect that girl.
Wow, wow, thank you. I think God is very fair. Let's take a short break, and then we resume after this to continue our study. So don't go away. We'll be looking at the laws concerning violence and animal control.